Anne-Marie, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Jake. Happy to be here with you today.
Yeah, today will be fun. We've got, as we were laughing off air, a shared network of people through the speaker world and specifically our friends over at the Speaker Lab. And so I'm excited to kind of have this conversation because you and I both work on the stages. We both have books and we both love sports. And so this is kind of fun for me. Where I'd love to know is, obviously you built a career, 3-time Emmy-winning award sports broadcaster. There's something about sports and the competitive bug that's in you as well. And so I'm curious if we flash back to little Anne-Marie, what was the sport? What captured that competitive spirit for you? And what do you remember most about it?
That is the easiest question for me because I am the youngest of 5 with 4 older brothers. Any more questions? Right?
Learn to play out of the gate.
Literally everything was a competition. Here's dinner. Hold up, I need some too. Whatever it was. So I never had control of the television. So all I watched growing up was sports. I have a very weird sports knowledge background where I can't find my keys, but I can remember the 1997 Orange Crush Broncos defense. And just growing up with my brothers, I wanted to be bigger in them and included.
Yeah. Okay. So what did you play growing up? What did you play in high school? What was kind of because we all have that period, right? You have the period you play and then you have to retire. But people like you, and for me for a little while, it's like I still got to be around the game or a game. And so talk to me about your kind of going from an athlete to really, how do I make a career being around it?
So I played everything growing up on a lot of teams with my brothers: basketball, softball, baseball, soccer, volleyball. And in high school, I decided to choose volleyball and got a college scholarship playing volleyball. And from there, interviewed at ESPN. I never really gave up playing. Still to this day, I still play beach volleyball. I live in California, so it's kind of a requirement when you live near the beach. You have to play,
You got that. You have that nice weather year round. It's mandatory. You got to take it.
Yes, exactly. They won't let you live here if you don't. But television is competitive too. Sports television is competitive. And so when I went to ESPN, I got a 6-month temporary job when I was 21 years old, working 6 at night to 3 in the morning, 6 days a week with Mondays off for $15,000 a year. I'm like, this is a dream, right? Yep. I can't do anything but a dream. But it was temporary. And I had to compete every day with the other people in my age group for that permanent job. And that means doing extra and above. And that's what you have to do as an athlete too. You don't do just what's required. You do extra in the preparation. So I think my athletic background prepared me well for athletic television.
Who was an early mentor of yours that, because you talked about, right, that as an athlete, you're always looking to do a little bit more. You're looking to have that edge. Sometimes we don't know what is even extra. Like we're kind of in survival mode sometimes, right? Where especially when we're starting out. Who was someone that kind of poured into you or said, hey, here's where some opportunities are? Especially, I would say, a lot of the folks you might have gone up against, right? You're working at ESPN, you're in and around a ton of sports, and you played a ton of sports, but you could also be typecast as, oh, we're going to put you just on volleyball broadcast. Like, we're not going to mess with you over here in this sport. So you're looking for the edge with everyone else. Who kind of poured into you of opportunities in and around that to display that Orange Crush Denver defense knowledge?
There you go. I am an observer of people. So I was watching the very successful Sports Center talent and what they were doing. And I remember Dan Patrick getting off the air for Sports Center at 11 o'clock. Sports Center, it was midnight. And immediately he would get from on the air to a chair watching the show that he had just been on. And I was like, what are you doing for this? And he said, I need to watch what I did so I can improve. And it was every day as soon as he finished on the air. It was really remarkable to me to watch and learn. Shelley Smith is another really skilled reporter who I watched her. She wrote, she was on TV, she did sideline. She did a little bit of everything. So her fingers were in every pie. And that's what I started doing. I wrote for ESPN, the magazine. I was a sideline reporter. I was a play-by-play announcer. I was a producer, just making myself indispensable. So I just watched everybody that I was working with try to keep themselves employed, if that makes sense, because TV it's so easy to be pushed out of it. And I just knew that if I made myself really versatile, same way you can think about it as a player, right? Make yourself versatile, they're going to find a spot for you. And that's true in sports, and it was true in television.
Yeah, one of the things that's always stuck with me about just sports is the lessons for life, right? What we learn on the field in a relatively safe environment sets us up for higher stakes places in our career and life outside of it. One of the things in that regard is dealing with failure, because in every sport you fail. Baseball, 7 out of 10 times if you're good, right?
If you're
Football, you're never having a perfect day. Even if you have a perfect quarterback rating, you still have incompletions. Talk about you. Is there a moment in your career you remember that sports and a lot of that background gave you the resilience and helped you kind of move through more of a challenging period?
Sure. When I was a producer at first. Well, I was a production assistant, moved my way up to being a producer, and had always harbored this desire to be on air, but I was afraid to tell anyone. And it was funny, last week I was on Good Morning America with Robin Roberts, who was also at ESPN when we were young, and she's like, "You didn't tell me for 10 years?" And we traveled the world. And I was like, "Nope, never told you," because I was just so fearful of being bad and what other people would think. So when I finally made the move on air, I was supposed to be on a little like regional television sideline, but somebody got sick and this and that. And so I got moved to ESPN2. So my first time ever on live television was in 70 million homes. I was just so sick, thinking I was going to be bad. I was going to be judged. I was going to be embarrassed. I was going to be exposed, and just absolute panic. I went on the air, and all those things were true, right? I was bad. Of course you're going to be bad your first time, and exposed and judged by people and embarrassed. And I survived. And the next week I got up and did it again. And the only thing that was better about the second time was that it wasn't the first time. But when you think about sports and that, well, you're not winning every game. It's about learning what you did wrong or what you could have done better in the first game that you take into the second game. That's why it's hard to beat a great team 3 times, because each time you're taking information. And it's the same thing in my career and in any career. When you don't have the success that you wish you had, what can you do better? What can you take away from it to get back up and to swing the bat again, using the baseball analogy?
Okay, so I have to ask, what year was that when you first went on air?
My first live was 2003.
2003. Okay, so here's a question for you, and I say this because I think it ties as well into your book that we're going to talk about today. If you were going to go live on air today on ESPN or ESPN2, this wonderful little device here is going to blow up on X and on Facebook and on all the additional comments and criticisms that you just talked about of people judging that moment. Talk to me about how you handled it then, and maybe it's still the same way you did now, of tuning out the outside voices. One, the imaginary ones that we play in our head of what's everybody going to say. But 2, the actual critics who more likely are in the stands and on the sidelines than on the field of life, right? How do you start to tune them out so that you can focus on being at your best in this moment versus allowing the what ifs or the naysayers to influence it?
I don't take advice from somebody who isn't where I want to be. So if it is another really talented broadcaster who's saying to me, "Boy, you should have done this better," I might listen to that and think, should I have done that better? But if it's somebody who's not doing what I'm trying to do, they don't get a vote in my life. And Laura Gassner-Otting in her book Limitless said, Don't give a vote to anyone who shouldn't even have a voice. And I live by that. So I'm on ESPN weekly now, and there's plenty of chatter out there. I'm sure I don't read it because it's not designed to make me better. The people who I do read are the people I admire, the colleagues, and my front row. I believe in developing, curating a careful group of front row people whose advice I take, who want me to be better, who I push them and hold them accountable. Other people that aren't interested in making me better, but are willing to just criticize me, I don't even hear it.
I love it. And huge shout out to LGO, who's back on she's an OG with Compete. She was on the podcast back on episode 38.
Oh, wow.
So if you want to go back in the archives, that was with her first book, Limitless. She's obviously got Wonder Hell out now, and it's just been exploding. And I'll have to send her a text after this that you name dropped her here on the show. She'll love that. But no, it makes sense, right? It's one of the things we live by and talk about is always that Theodore Roosevelt quote, "Man in the arena." Like the credit belongs to the one who's in the arena, not on the sidelines. Okay, switch gears. One of the things that I was interested in when you reached out, and to be honest, like one of the reasons I wanted to have a conversation is because of the shared relationships with the Speaker Lab. Like we both did some training at the same group. And you talk about in your pitch email or your team's email, which cracked me up, is a reframe on the idea of being cocky.
Yes.
Because I've always felt like confidence is like you're fully secure, you know who you are, you can perform. Cockiness is when you're trying to fill the gap of you're not quite sure if you can perform or you've never done it and you're not sure. And so you're leaning into the ego. But you have a different definition of it. And so I'd love to hear how this story came about with you and your father.
Yeah, my father, first of all, God rest his soul, was the most supportive, fantastic father. I think one time in my life he said something negative, and that was, he said, "Anne-Marie, when I was 11, you're getting a little bit cocky." And I held on to that for 40 years because that's what kids do, right?
That's right. We hold on so well.
Like, he's the most fantastic man. And I'm like, my dad called me cocky when I was 11. But I live with that. And so that was part of what I let hold me back from moving in front of the camera, because I thought, well, if you move in front of the camera, it's who does she think she is? She wants all eyes on her. And I thought cocky was, as you said, like, you don't really have the skill, but you are pretending like you do or bragging. Until literally as I was writing this book. So this is decades and decades later. I'm writing the book and I look up the definition of cocky, just out of curiosity. And it says, so sure of one's abilities that it annoys other people. That's the actual definition. And I was like, wait a second. So sure of one's abilities. Yeah, I am sure of my abilities, especially when it comes to television or when it comes to certain arenas. That it annoys other people. Well, as my teenagers would say, that's OPP. That's other people's problems. And that changed everything for me, because I thought, as long as you're doing the work and you're doing the best that you can, that is a high level, okay, fine, call me cocky. But it is in line with audacity, right? Which is the willingness to take bold risks. Do you have to be confident to do that? Do you have to be a little cocky to do that? Sure, whatever. Labels all over the place. Audacity used to have a negative connotation too, but I'm trying to change that.
I love that. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about audacity, because the thing that, you talk about your book, Dismantle Doubt and Let Yourself Win, the doubt is what stops most people. And I would also say some of the stuff we talked about earlier, right? The doubts that are fed by outside critics or the imaginary stories in our head. And so that also, I would imagine, is a very personal, like, for instance, the perfect example you gave is you and Robin Roberts' conversation of, I never knew that. I worked with you for years and I never knew that. Because being afraid or being doubtful is something very internal. We don't want to talk about it. We don't want to publicize it. And so I'm curious, how does someone recognize or pull at the thread that the areas they're maybe self-sabotaging or stopping themselves is actually just doubt getting in the way of them taking risk?
There's 4 barriers that I found stop people from doing the thing, whatever the thing is that they want to do. And it's fear, time, money, or your inner critic. And the doubt lives primarily in the 2 on either end. Either it's your inner critic just talking at you the whole time, or fear of being judged, exposed, embarrassed, whatever it is. So when we talk about kind of taming your doubt, you have to recognize it first. And I think we're told all along, conquer your fears, push it away, don't listen to that voice, as if it's that easy to just throw it away.
Snap the fingers, yep.
Right. If it was that easy, we'd all be doing it. I say, look, fear is going to be with you every step of the way. Your inner critic is going to be with you every step of the way. So take it on the road with you. Just don't let it make any decisions. It doesn't get to drive. It doesn't get to control what you're doing. Maybe there's a grain of truth in what's happening. But for your inner critic, the most important thing for me is recognizing that it's not actually my voice. I think because we hear it in our head,
Yep.
we think it's us. And I had this discussion with my 11-year-old daughter, who one day, 6th grade, I picked her up from school and I said, hey, I'm all cheerful. How was school today? And she goes, well, I'm stupid. I can't do math and I'm fat. And I was like, whoa.
Boy,
No,
that's a loaded start to the conference.
that's quite a thing. Would you like a snack? Kind of thing. And so we dissected it, and we start with the basic. Like, would you say that to somebody else? Would you say that to me? No, of course not. Okay, if this isn't something you would say, then recognize you're not the voice that you hear in your head. That's somebody else. So I had her, and I do this for myself as well, separate that voice, literally give it a different name.
Do you write it down to help separate it? Yeah.
No, we don't, but we call it by name. So she picked the name Jerry.
Okay.
And so I said, okay, what would you do if you walk in the house and Jerry says, you're stupid, you can't do math, and oh, by the way, you're fat? And she goes, well, I'd say, shut up, Jerry. And I was like, absolutely. So, by separating it and talking about it in that way, now when I hear her in the kitchen going, oh, she's doing her homework, I can't do this. I will literally, we don't even say shut up in my house. I will literally go, shut up, Jerry. And she's like, I know. But it breaks you out of that moment. The doubt that you have, it's just trying to keep you safe. I'm not good enough. I'm not ready. This isn't the right time. It is trying to stop you from getting hurt. And that's why when I talk about like the front row of people whose advice you will take, it's probably not your mom in your front row, and it's probably not your best friend, because they want you to be safe. They don't want to see you be hurt. The people in your front row need to be doing big things themselves, and will talk you off the ledge, will pick you up, will brainstorm ideas with you that will help combat that doubt that you have, that you're going to acknowledge and let it just hang there.
One of the things I'm curious about, I want to ask about one of the other 4 areas as well, but specifically around doubt. And we've talked about this here on the show a bunch, is the idea of cultivating confidence, right? Mm-hmm. Confidence can help battle that doubt, but you have to do things to collect the evidence to start overshadowing that doubt. So that first step of naming it, but then taking action to refute it, is that kind of 1-2, or is there something in between there?
I think there's 3 components to Audacity. The first part is just the mindset, which is basically optimism when you really think about it, that things are going to work out. They may not work out the way you want, but that you'll survive how it works out. And the example I always give is, if you're in a basketball game, you're down by 12 at the half, why do you come out and play the second half? Because maybe, right, you'll win that game if you're able to get yourself together. But even if you don't, you're going to survive.
Yep.
And that's really important. But nothing's going to happen. You can sit on the couch all day and being optimistic, and nothing's going to happen until you take action. Yep. And audacious action, right? If Audacity is taking a bold risk, it means doing something unexpected. Anything. It can be saying no. It can be reaching out to somebody on social media who's doing what you want, seeing if you can connect with them and get advice. Whatever it is, some audacious action. And when the behavior, right, the mindset and the behavior get added together consistently, that's when you start to build an audacious identity. And that's when you go from, what the heck is Jake doing, to, well, that's Jake. He swings for the fences. And that's where you start to really get your confidence, as you're talking about your confidence data, to say, I went out, I did something that made me uncomfortable, and I survived. The Audacity win is not in the outcome. It's in the action. That you were uncomfortable, you did something unexpected. That's where the win is. So it isn't some kind of far off destination or you making it to the top. It's in the daily actions of doing things that are unexpected and sometimes uncomfortable.
And that ties so well in. We talk all the time of marrying yourself, your worth, your confidence to the process and divorcing it from the outcome, because we don't control the outcome, right?
That's right.
Sports, we've all seen it. You play your heart out, the best game of your life, you still lose. And we've all won a few that we're really lucky and shouldn't have. So I love how you package that. The other thing I want to ask around this is, because you mentioned time. And when we talk about time, you really talk about this idea of urgency fallacy and prioritizing important over urgent. And that's a struggle for all of us, because I would imagine most people listening have a lot of important priorities. They've got to get done immediately, right? Everything's a priority, nothing's a priority. They struggle with that balance. So how do you start to identify what are the right things to work on to overcome that doubt?
So the urgency fallacy is this. Our whole lives are urgent, right? You get the email, you get the text, you need to make dinner, whatever it is, sign the permission slip. Everything's urgent. And we've been sold the idea that urgent means it's important. And it's really not. So the first step is identifying the difference between what's urgent and what's important. And here's how you can tell the difference. Things that are urgent are generally reactionary. Something's been asked of us, respond to this email, this text, do this. Things that are important are self-generated that move us closer to our values, vision, and goals. Things that are urgent have an impending deadline. It needs to be done by such and such of a time. It may not require that much thought, but it's that dopamine hit of checking it off your list. Done, done, done. And I'm one of those people that's guilty of writing something on my to-do list after I've already done it just to get the hit of checking it off. Being like, yeah, I did that. I know, I just wrote it on there. Things that are important don't necessarily have an impending deadline, but there's consequences if you don't do it. Write the book, get on stage, write your speech, whatever it is. So we have to consciously schedule time for what's important, or urgent will take over, because urgent never ends. The whole day is urgent. And that's where people make a mistake with time, is they say, I will do the thing that's important to me when I have more time, when I have more money.
The justification, the one day.
Right? When I have more qualifications, especially for women, we talk about the glass ceiling, but it's really about the sticky floor for all of us, because we're stuck to the floor waiting for the right time, the right moment, when we have everything that we need to do it, and everybody else is passing us by. So whether that is an hour straight, whether that is 4 15-minute blocks, 3 times a day, 20 minutes, creating space for whatever it is that will move you closer to your values, vision, goals, and who you want to be. When you do that consistently, then you're building and you're moving forward.
And this would be something you relate to as we talk kind of briefly on our speaker training. Some of the coaching I do with TSL is, we talk to the students if they look for consistently working. We talk pipeline every day. Right. And people focus on the stagecraft, but not the prospecting and building the business. And I tell the students, I'm like, listen, some of you are going to have a hard time finding an hour a day. But if you do 20 minutes every day, like, you'll grow your business, because most people won't do that 15 to 20 minutes to work on the important, as you just talked about, work on those key things. And I think it's a lot of our human nature, because we can't do everything in 20 minutes, that we fail to see that we're stacking progress. And I talk about it on stage as Lego blocks. And so I love hearing you set those times, put them in your calendar, look for those opportunities, because every one of us, if we got into our phone and looked at our screen time, there's 20 minutes to be found there. Yes. It's scrolling an app, it's doing something else, it's being with your email inbox open all day. There's all sorts of things that could play to that. Anne-Marie, this has been interesting. Okay, so what I want to hear is we kind of close out. The book is around really being more audacious, right? Overcoming doubt. Who's the ideal person for this? Like, maybe the person knows, I just doubt myself, I don't believe in myself, I can't do it. But there's probably another person that's not as self-aware of that doubt that needs to read this. Who would you say that is?
If you're not living the way that you want to live, then there's something in your way, whatever it is. And that doesn't have to be career, by the way. If you're in an unhealthy relationship, but you're afraid to leave, right? Because, well, then you need a front row of people who are going to help you dismantle that doubt and overcome the fear, figure out systems to manage it. It's not just leave, it'll be fine. But anybody who's not, honestly, excited to wake up every day to what they're doing. We all have little areas. That's why in the back of the book, I have an assessment that takes your career and professional, your health and wellness, and your relationships. So you can really break down your degree of satisfaction in your life right now and see where you're missing, because it's a constant reevaluation loop to just live a little bit more fully and do that thing that's been hanging over you that you've always wanted to do.
Love it. I love it. And we've got not only Anne-Marie's book listed here in the show notes, all you got to do is click below to get it. We've also got her website, as I mentioned off air or at the beginning of the show. She's a keynote speaker as well. We have mutual clients, prospects in common. And so I know they vouch for her. In fact, if you just go to her website, you'll see a number of them on there. And she talks a lot about this, right? How do we be more audacious? Career-wise, it helps us in so many ways, how we show up, who we are. And so if you're interested in learning more, you'll find that as well as a link to her Instagram. Anne-Marie, this has been a ton of fun. I appreciate you coming on the show. As we wrap up today, I want you to explain the kind of your tagline, which I love on your website, of when no means not yet or next. Because you see no as a, let's just not this moment or not this, right? Versus it's done. End of story, shut the book. Where did that start to come from?
Right. Well, no is a comma for me, right? Sometimes people have it as a period.
Yep.
It's just a comma that's going to redirect. Where did that come from? All the rejections. Television is a heavy rejection business, and so is speaking. And, I found for a while, my oldest son was like, yeah, you're speaking. That's great. You're getting this and this. So I started to share with him the non-answers and the rejections. Hey, I sent out 20 emails today, no responses to any of those. And he's like, gosh, I don't know if I could do that. And I was like, of course you can, because you just have to not take it personally. And I was the most thin-skinned person in the world. So for me, no opportunity is closed. It may not be the right one for me, and it may redirect me somewhere else. So sometimes it's not yet, and I'll get another chance at that. And sometimes it's, okay, let's look for the next. But there is no stopping point to any of this, to our careers, our lives, our relationships, and our audacity.
I love it. I love that. I actually, it's funny. I shared earlier this year, I had a gig that we had a verbal agreement contract out. We're working with the payment schedule, and then they just banked. They changed. Yep. And earlier in my career, it would have crushed me. And I was like still bummed about it because I was like, oh, it was right here. But then I laughed because in December, I did a gig that took me 4 years. Like every year was not the right time, but you just stay and build the relationship and look for that. Yeah. So I love how you see no as a comma. So all the listeners, if you're interested in Anne-Marie's book, we've got a link to the show notes. If you're interested in hiring her, we've got a link as well. And be sure to give her a follow online. It's been fun. It's so great to have you on the show this week.
Thank you for having me. I loved our conversation.